She was just a hotel maid trying to get home after a 16-hour shift. The confused stranger on the bus had empty pockets, so she paid his fare with money meant for her mother's medicine. What she didn't know, the man she helped was the Vampire King. And he'd just sworn to protect her forever. The fluorescent lights of bus Route 17 flickered like dying stars as Mira collapsed into a seat near the back. Her feet screamed inside cheap sneakers, her lower back throbbed, and somewhere beneath her ribs sat a hollow ache that 16 hours of scrubbing toilets and changing sheets always left behind. She was 23 and felt 50. The bus lurched forward, swallowing the midnight streets of the city in mechanical groans. Only 4 other passengers occupied the scattered seats: a sleeping college student, an elderly woman clutching shopping bags, and a businessman whose tie hung loose around his neck like a noose he'd barely escaped. Mira leaned her head against the cold window and watched the city blur past. Neon signs advertising late-night pharmacies and 24-hour diners painted streaks of red and green across the glass. In 6 stops, she'd be home. In 7 hours, her alarm would scream, and she'd do this all over again. The bus hissed to a stop at Morrison and 5th. That's when he got on. The man moved like he was wading through water, slow, uncertain, as if the very act of walking required intense concentration. His clothing looked like something pulled from a museum exhibit: a long black coat with silver buttons, a vest embroidered with patterns too intricate for modern fashion, and boots that clicked against the bus floor with an oddly hollow sound. But it was his face that made Myra's breath catch. He was beautiful in the way old paintings were beautiful, pale, sharp-featured, with eyes that seemed to hold centuries instead of years. His skin had an almost translucent quality under the harsh bus lights, and his dark hair fell in waves that framed his face like a portrait. He stood at the front, swaying slightly as the bus moved, and stared at the fare machine as if it were an alien artifact. "You getting on or what?" the driver barked. "This ain't a museum tour." The pale man reached into his pockets. His movements were deliberate, careful. He searched one pocket, then another, his expression shifting from confusion to something that looked almost like panic. "I seem to have," his voice was soft, accent unplaceable. "I apologize. I don't have." "No fare, no ride." The driver's hand moved toward the door lever. "Come on, man. I got a schedule." The college student snorted awake long enough to mutter, "Probably some trust fund kid playing dress up." The elderly woman clutched her bags tighter, as if the strange man might snatch them. The businessman didn't even look up from his phone. Mira watched the man's face. There was no anger there, no indignation, only a profound confusion, as if he'd woken up in a world he no longer recognized. His hand trembled slightly as he withdrew it from his empty pocket. She didn't think. Thinking would have reminded her that she had exactly $43 to last until Friday. Thinking would have reminded her that her mother needed medicine, that the rent was due, that every dollar mattered. Instead, she stood. "Wait," her voice cracked from exhaustion. She made her way to the front, digging through her purse for the crumpled bills she'd earned in tips from guests who barely looked at her face. "I'll pay his fare." The driver raised an eyebrow. "You sure? Guy looks like he belongs in a Halloween store." "I'm sure." She fed the money into the machine. The mechanical whir and beep felt louder than it should have, like the sound was echoing in a space much larger than the bus. The pale man turned to her. That's when everything changed. His eyes met hers, and Mira felt the world tilt. They weren't just eyes, they were depths, ancient and vast, holding something that made her bones recognize a truth her mind refused to accept. In that gaze, she saw kingdoms falling, centuries passing, blood and moonlight and power that had no name. And then he smiled, small, sad, almost relieved. "Mira," he whispered. Her blood went ice cold. "How do you?" she started, but her voice died in her throat. She'd never seen this man before. She was certain of it. His face wasn't something anyone could forget. And yet he'd spoken her name with the familiarity of someone who'd known her for years, as if her identity was written in a language only he could read. "I'm in your debt," he said softly, and something in the way he pronounced debt made it sound like a binding contract, like a chain forged from words instead of iron. The bus doors hissed shut. He moved past her with that same underwater grace and took a seat in the very back, partially hidden in shadows. Mira stood frozen at the front, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You okay, miss?" the driver asked, but his voice sounded distant, muffled. She nodded mechanically and returned to her seat, but not the one she'd been in. Some instinct made her choose a spot where she could watch the strange man without being obvious about it. He sat perfectly still. Not the stillness of someone resting, but the stillness of a statue, no fidgeting, no adjustment of clothing, no checking of phones. He simply existed in that space, and somehow his presence made the back of the bus feel darker than the dim lights should allow. The businessman got off at the next stop. 2 stops later, the elderly woman shuffled out, glancing back nervously at the pale man before hurrying into the night. The college student slept through their stop and jolted awake 3 blocks later, stumbling out with mumbled curses. Now it was just Mira, the driver, and the stranger. For more stops. Her apartment was 4 more stops away, and with each passing block, Myra's unease grew. The man hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, just sat there, barely visible in the shadows, and yet she could feel his attention like weight against her skin. Finally, her stop approached. She stood, gripping the handrail too tight, and made her way to the exit. As she passed the back of the bus, she couldn't help it. She looked. He was staring directly at her. "Thank you, Mira," he said, and this time his voice carried something else, gratitude, yes, but also warning. "What you've done tonight will echo further than you can imagine." The doors opened. She fled into the night, not looking back, her footsteps echoing on empty sidewalks. Only when she reached her apartment building, hands shaking as she fumbled with her keys, did she let herself breathe. It was nothing. A weird guy. Maybe he'd heard someone say her name before. Maybe she was just exhausted and imagining things. But as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. That the act of paying a bus fare, something so small, so meaningless, had somehow changed the trajectory of her entire life. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and locked it behind her. In the darkness of her tiny apartment, where her mother slept in the only bedroom and Myra's couch served as her bed, she whispered to herself, it was just a bus fare. Just a bus fare. But deep in her bones, in that ancient place where humans still remembered to fear the dark, she knew better. Something had begun tonight. And there was no going back. Morning came too quickly, dragging Mira from restless dreams filled with pale faces and eyes that held centuries. Her alarm shrieked at 6 a.m., and she slapped it silent with a groan that came from somewhere deep in her soul. The apartment was already warm, the ancient radiator hissing and clanking like it was angry about having to work. Mira could hear her mother coughing in the bedroom, that wet, rattling sound that had been getting worse for months. "I'm fine," Elise called out before Mira could ask, her voice hoarse. "Just need my inhaler. Go to work, baby. We need the money." Myra's chest tightened, but she nodded even though her mother couldn't see. "There's bread and jam. I'll bring dinner tonight." She dressed in her maid's uniform, a plain gray dress that smelled perpetually of bleach and other people's lives, and left before the guilt could root her to the spot. The Crescent Hotel loomed at the end of 3 bus rides, a monument to old money trying desperately to look relevant. Mira swiped her employee card and entered through the service entrance, joining the parade of invisible people who kept luxury running smoothly. "You look like death," Rosa said, already loading her cleaning cart. The older woman had worked at the Crescent for 15 years and had the permanently tired eyes to prove it. "Rough night, aren't they all?" Rosa handed her a stack of fresh towels. "You got floors 6 through 9 today. Lucky you some tech conference checked in. They tip decent if you don't bother them." Mira took her cart and headed for the elevators, but her mind kept drifting back to the bus, to the pale man who'd known her name, to the way he'd looked at her like she was something significant, something that mattered. Mira. No one said her name like that, like it was precious. Earth to Mira. She jolted back to reality. Rosa was standing in the break room doorway, phone in hand, scrolling through something with wide eyes. You see this? Rosa turned the screen toward her. Night Council goes dark. Vampire Senate in chaos. Can you believe people still eat this stuff up? The headline blazed across some conspiracy website, complete with grainy photos of abandoned buildings and anonymous sources. Mira forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to her own ears. Vampires. Sure. What's next? Werewolves running for mayor? Right? Rosa shook her head, pocketing her phone. My cousin's boyfriend swears he saw one once. I told him to lay off the drugs. But as Rosa walked away, still chuckling, Myra's laughter died. She stared at the now empty doorway, her mind racing with connections she didn't want to make. Asterisk Night Council. Senate. Chaos star. Asterisco no. Don't be stupid star. Vampires were myths, stories, late-night TV entertainment for people with nothing better to do. They weren't real. They couldn't be real. She pushed the thought away and focused on work. Floors 6 through 9. Empty rooms. Clean sheets. Scrub, wipe, vacuum, repeat. The monotony was almost comforting. Until she cleaned room 714. The guests had left their curtains open, and from this height, Mira could see across the street to the small park where office workers ate lunch. She was changing the pillowcases when movement caught her eye. A figure stood beneath a bare oak tree, perfectly still despite the wind that scattered leaves around everyone else. The pale man from the bus. He wore different clothes now, a simple dark suit that somehow looked just as outdated as his previous outfit, but there was no mistaking that face. Even from 9 floors up, even with distance and glass between them, Mira felt his gaze lock onto hers. The pillowcase slipped from her hands. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just stood there, watching her with that same ancient intensity that made her feel like a specimen under glass. And then, as a delivery truck passed between them, he simply vanished. Not walked away, not ducked behind the tree. Vanished.
No, Mira whispered. No, no, no.
She stumbled back from the window, her hip hitting the desk, pain shooting through her side. Her breath came in short gasps. This wasn't happening. She was tired, overworked, probably hallucinating from stress and lack of sleep. But the image of him standing there, impossible and real, burned behind her eyelids. She finished the room in a daze, mechanically going through motions her body knew by heart. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of rooms that all looked the same, conversations with coworkers that she couldn't quite remember, and an overwhelming urge to look over her shoulder every few minutes. By the time she clocked out at 3 p.m., Mira had almost convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing. Stress hallucination. That was reasonable. That made sense. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. She kept her eyes down, avoiding her reflection in the windows, avoiding the other passengers' faces in case one of them had eyes too old for their body. Her apartment building came into view like a lighthouse in a storm, safe, familiar, normal. She climbed the stairs quickly, keys already in hand. That's when she saw it. On the doormat, exactly centered, lay an envelope. Not regular mail. This was made of heavy paper, almost parchment, and sealed with black wax. Pressed into the wax was a symbol, a bat with outstretched wings, rendered in crimson red so dark it looked like dried blood. Myra's hands shook as she picked it up. The paper felt expensive, weighty with importance. Her name was written on the front in calligraphy so perfect it looked printed. Mira Chun. No address.
No stamp.
Just her name. She glanced down the hallway. Empty. Looked up the stairs. Nothing. The building was silent except for the distant sound of a television and someone's music bleeding through thin walls. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. Inside was a single card, the same heavy paper, with a message written in that same flawless script. Asterisk, you saved the Crimson King. Your life is owed protection star. What comes next cannot be avoided. They are already hunting you. The card slipped from Myra's fingers and fluttered to the floor. She stared at it, her mind refusing to process the words even as her body recognized danger on some primal level. The door behind her opened. Mira? What's wrong? Her mother stood in the doorway, wrapped in a faded bathrobe, her face gray with exhaustion and illness. Elise's eyes dropped to the card on the floor, and her expression shifted from concern to anger. Is this about money? Elise bent to pick it up, wincing at the movement. Did you borrow from someone? Those illegal loan sharks with their threats. No, mom, I told you we'd figure it out. Elise's voice cracked. We don't need their help. We don't need anyone's. She tore the card in half, then in half again, the pieces falling like black snow. You stay away from people like this, you hear me? Nothing good comes from. A fit of coughing cut her off, violent and wet. Mira grabbed her mother's shoulders, steadying her, helping her back inside the apartment. But even as she closed the door, even as she helped Elise to the couch and fetched her medicine, Myra's mind was racing. Crimson King, your life is owed protection. They are already hunting you. She looked at the torn pieces of cards scattered across the floor, and in the shadows of their small apartment, Mira felt the walls closing in. Whatever had begun last night on bus route 17 was far from over. It had only just begun. The medicine cabinet was almost empty. Mira stared at the 2 remaining doses of her mother's inhaler, doing mental math that always ended in panic. 3 days until payday. The prescription refill cost $60 they didn't have. She closed the cabinet and pressed her forehead against the mirror, avoiding her own reflection. I'm fine, really, Elise called from the living room, her voice still raspy. Stop fussing. You need more medicine. We'll manage. We always do. We always do, the family motto, spoken over unpaid bills and empty refrigerators and every small crisis that had filled Myra's life since her father left when she was 12. Her mother had raised her alone, working 2 jobs until her lungs started failing, until standing for more than an hour left her gasping. Now it was Myra's turn to hold everything together with duct tape and desperation. She splashed water on her face and returned to the living room. Elise had swept up the torn pieces of the card and was watching the evening news with practiced disinterest. Politicians making promises. Traffic reports. Weather. I need to run to the pharmacy, Mira said, grabbing her jacket. See if they have any samples or... Mira, Elise muted the television. That letter. Who was it really from? I don't know. Don't lie to me. Mira met her mother's eyes, dark brown, like her own, but dimmed by exhaustion and worry. I'm not lying. I honestly don't know who sent it. Elise studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. If someone's threatening you, they're not. I think it might be some kind of mistake. The lie tasted bitter. Wrong address or something. With your name on it? Mira had no answer for that. The grocery store pharmacy was a 15-minute walk, located in a strip mall that had seen better decades. Fluorescent lights hummed over aisles of off-brand cereals and wilted produce. Mira headed straight for the pharmacy counter, where a tired-looking technician was counting pills. Hi, I need to ask about my mother's prescription, Elise Jin. We're not due for a refill yet, but I was wondering if there were any programs or samples. Let me check, the technician typed slowly, one finger at a time. Okay, she's got, not due until next week. We don't usually do samples for regular medications, but you could talk to her doctor about. A crash echoed from the parking lot. Both Mira and the technician looked toward the front windows. Through the glass, Mira could see a car alarm flashing, its shrill scream muffled by the store walls. Probably just a fender bender, the technician muttered. Anyway, like I was saying. But Mira had stopped listening. In the parking lot, illuminated by the stuttering lights of the car alarm, stood two figures. They were too far away for her to make out details, but something about the way they moved, fluid, predatory, made her stomach drop. They were looking at the store. Looking at her. Miss? You okay? Mira blinked, forcing herself to focus.
Yes. Sorry.
Thank you for checking. She backed away from the counter, her eyes still on the parking lot. I'll call the doctor. She moved quickly down the aisles, grabbing her mother's preferred brand of cough drops and a bottle of cheap pain relievers, things they needed, things that gave her an excuse to stay inside longer. But as she approached the checkout, she risked another glance at the windows. The two figures were closer now. Close enough that she could see their faces. Young, perhaps early 20s, wearing normal clothes. Hoodies and jeans. They could have been college students or delivery drivers or anyone. Except for their eyes. Even through the distance and glass, even under the harsh parking lot lights, their eyes caught the light wrong. They gleamed gold, like animal eyes in headlights, reflecting something that human eyes shouldn't reflect. One of them smiled, and Mira saw teeth. Too many teeth. Too sharp. Her hands shook as she set the items on the counter. The cashier, an elderly man reading a magazine, barely looked up as he scanned them. $12.47. Mira fumbled with her wallet, dropping coins. As she bent to pick them up, she saw through the lower part of the window. The two figures were walking toward the entrance. Not running, not rushing, just walking with terrible, patient certainty. Keep the change. She shoved $15 at the cashier and grabbed the bag. But she was already moving, heading not toward the front entrance but toward the back of the store, past the pharmacy, past the employees-only sign. A delivery door. There had to be a delivery door. Behind her, the front entrance chimed. Mira didn't look back. She pushed through a swinging door into a storage area filled with boxes and the sour smell of rotting produce. There, the delivery entrance, a heavy metal door with a push bar. She slammed through it into the alley behind the strip mall and ran directly into something solid. Arms caught her before she fell, cold arms, strong enough to feel like steel wrapped in silk. She looked up into a face she'd seen twice before. The pale man from the bus. Mira, he said, and his voice held urgency. Don't scream. I'm not here to hurt you. But Mira wasn't looking at him. She was looking past him, to where two more figures had appeared at the end of the alley. Not the ones from the store, these were different. Older. Their eyes glowed the same wrong gold. She's just a human, one of them said, voice dripping with disdain. Why does the fallen king care about? The pale man moved. One moment he was holding Mira, the next he was standing between her and the attackers. He raised one hand, fingers splayed, and whispered something in a language that sounded like wind through graveyards. The attackers stopped. Their eyes widened. And then, starting from their chests and spreading outward like cracks in ice, their veins turned black. Ink black, visible through their skin, racing up their necks and down their arms. They collapsed without a sound, bodies hitting the pavement like dropped mannequins. The pale man turned back to Mira. In the alley's dim light, his eyes reflected red. My name is Vesperian, he said quietly. And whether you believe it or not, you are now under the protection of the Crimson King. From the front of the store came shouting. The first two attackers, emerging from the entrance. Vesperian's jaw tightened. You have a choice, Mira. Come with me and live, or run and die before dawn. Myra's mind raced through impossible options, each one ending in terror. But some instinct, the same one that had made her pay a stranger's bus fare, whispered an answer. My mother, she gasped. They'll go after my mother. Something flickered across Vesperian's ancient face. Surprise, perhaps. Or respect. Then we get her first. He held out his hand. And Mira, with no other choice left in the world, took it. Vesperian moved through the city like smoke given form, silent, swift, and impossible to track. Mira ran beside him, her lungs burning, her mind screaming that none of this could be real even as her legs pumped faster than they ever had before. They didn't take streets. They took alleys, fire escapes, paths that seemed to exist in the gaps between the city's normal geography. Twice, Mira heard the sound of footsteps behind them, that same predatory grace, and twice, Vesperian pulled her into shadows that felt deeper than they should be. "Don't look back," he commanded, "and don't let go of my hand." His skin was cold, not corpse cold, but like marble that had never known sunlight. Yet his grip was gentle, careful, as if he was afraid his strength might break her. They reached her apartment building in minutes that felt like hours. Myra's keys rattled in the lock, her hands shaking so badly she dropped them twice before getting the door open. "Mom," she burst inside. "Mom, we need to." The apartment was empty. Not just empty.
Wrong.
The television was still on, muted, casting flickering light across the room. Her mother's bathrobe lay discarded on the couch. The front door had been locked from the inside, but the window was open. 3 stories up, and the window was open. "No," Mira rushed to it, looking down at the impossible distance to the ground. No, she couldn't have. She didn't jump. Vesperian stood at the window, his expression grim. "They took her. Through here." He touched the windowsill, and his fingers came away with something dark and viscous. "Scent markers. They want us to follow." "Then we follow." Mira spun on him, fury overwhelming fear. "You said you'd protect her. You said." "I said I would try." His red eyes met hers without flinching. "The life debt binds me to you, Mira. Not to everyone you love. That's not how it works." "Then what good are you?" The words came out as a sob. For a moment, something almost like pain crossed his ancient face. "More good than you know. Your mother is bait, but she's also leverage. They won't kill her, not yet. They need her alive to draw you out." "Who are they?" "The Daybreak Coalition. Vampire hunters who've infiltrated every level of government." He moved away from the window, scanning the apartment with clinical efficiency. "They want me dead. They want my throne. And now they know that the human who paid my bus fare is someone I'm bound to protect. I don't understand any of this." Mira pressed her palms against her temples. "Yesterday, I was a maid. Yesterday, the craziest thing in my life was whether I could afford rent. Now you're telling me vampires are real, and hunters, and... Look at me."
She did.
Vesperian's eyes had changed. The red was brighter now, luminous, and his canines had elongated into points that definitely hadn't been there before. Not dramatically, not like movie monsters, just enough to be undeniably, horrifyingly real. "We don't have time for gentle explanations," he said softly. "Your mother has perhaps 2 hours before they move her to a location I can't reach. So I need you to decide right now. Do you want to save her, or do you want to understand? Because we don't have time for both." Myra's breath came in short gasps. Every rational part of her brain was screaming. But beneath the panic was something else, that same instinct that had made her help a stranger on a bus. "Save her," she whispered. "Tell me what to do." Vesperian nodded once, sharply. "They'll have taken her to a secondary location for interrogation. Somewhere public enough to seem safe, but isolated enough for extraction. My guess is the old warehouse district near the port." "Your guess?" "I've been away from the throne for 3 weeks, Mira. My information network is compromised." He moved toward the door. "But I still have allies. One is waiting for us now." "Waiting where?" "Somewhere that shouldn't exist." They left through the front door this time. Vesperian didn't bother with stealth now. He walked with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how dangerous he was. Mira hurried to keep up, clutching the pharmacy bag she'd somehow never dropped. A car waited at the curb. Not a car, a vehicle that looked like it had been pulled from another era. Black, sleek, with curves that modern cars had forgotten how to make. Behind the wheel sat a woman with short silver hair and eyes that reflected amber in the streetlight. "You're late," the woman said. "We had complications." Vesperian opened the back door for Mira. "Sable, meet Mira Chin, the girl who paid my fare." Sable's amber eyes studied Mira with an intensity that made her want to hide. This is what all the fuss is about. She looks half dead already. 16-hour shifts will do that. Mira snapped before she could stop herself. A smile ghosted across Sable's face. "She's got spine. Good. She'll need it." The engine purred to life. "The library?" "The library," Vesperian confirmed. As they pulled away from the curb, Mira saw them, 3 figures standing in the shadows across the street. Watching. One of them raised a hand in a mocking wave. "They're not even hiding," Mira whispered. "Why would they?" Sable took a turn too fast, the car gliding through it like oil. "They own the police, the city council, half the government. They can hunt us in broad daylight now and call it pest control. Then how are we supposed to?" "We." Sable laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, honey, there is no we. You're a liability. A human who got tangled up in vampire politics because she was too nice for her own good." "Sable," Vesperian's voice carried warning. "What?" "It's true. The girl should run. Get on a bus, ironically, and disappear before the Daybreak Coalition decides she knows too much. And leave my mother to die." Sable's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "Your mother's probably already dead, sweetheart. They don't take prisoners for tea parties." Rage flooded through Mira. Hot, clean rage that burned away the fear. "Then drive faster." Something shifted in Sable's expression. "Vesperian, I take it back. I like her." The car accelerated, leaving the familiar streets behind. They drove through parts of the city Mira had never seen, where the buildings looked older and the streetlights flickered with a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. And ahead, rising against the night sky like a monument to forgotten things, loomed a structure that Mira was absolutely certain had not been there yesterday. A Gothic library, all spires and stained glass, standing where an abandoned lot should be. "Welcome," Vesperian said quietly, "to the last free sanctuary of the Crimson Court." The car stopped, and Mira stepped out into a world that had stopped making sense. Her mother was out there somewhere, in the hands of monsters. And the only people who could help her were monsters themselves. The library's doors opened before they reached them, massive oak panels carved with scenes that made Myra's eyes hurt if she looked too long. Battles, perhaps. Or dances. The images seemed to shift in the corner of her vision. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and something else. Something metallic and sweet that Myra's hindbrain recognized as blood. "Don't touch anything," Sable warned, leading them through an entrance hall lined with portraits. The painted eyes followed their movement. "And definitely don't accept food or drink from anyone except Ariel." "Whose?" "You'll see." The main library opened before them like a cathedral. Shelves stretched 3 stories high, connected by spiral staircases and walkways that defied physics. Books lined every surface, leather-bound volumes, ancient scrolls, manuscripts that looked like they'd crumble at a touch. Candles floated without holders, their flames casting shadows that moved independently. And among the shelves moved figures, pale, graceful, their movements too smooth to be entirely human. "How many?" Vesperian asked. 43, a new voice answered. "Down from 200 last week." A woman emerged from behind a towering shelf, pushing a cart loaded with books. She was human. Mira could tell immediately by the warmth in her cheeks, the natural rhythm of her breathing. Perhaps 40 years old, with dark skin and gray-streaked hair pulled into a practical bun. Reading glasses hung on a chain around her neck. She looked like someone's favorite librarian. "Mira, this is Ariel," Vesperian said. "She's been the Crimson Court's archivist for 20 years. 22, Ariel corrected, extending her hand. Unlike Vesperian's cold grip, hers was warm, human. The contact nearly made Mira cry with relief. "You're the girl from the bus." The one who started all this. I didn't start anything, Mira said weakly. I just paid a fare. And inadvertently invoked one of our oldest laws. Ariel gestured for them to follow her deeper into the library. The life debt. When a vampire's life is saved by a mortal's unprompted kindness, a bond is formed. The vampire is bound to protect their savior until the debt is repaid in equal measure. They passed through reading rooms where vampires sat in clusters, speaking in low voices. Some looked human enough. Others didn't. Mira tried not to stare at the woman whose eyes were solid black, or the man whose shadow moved a full second behind his body. I don't understand, Mira said. How did paying a bus fare save his life? Ariel led them to a private study and closed the door. Inside, a fire crackled in a hearth that radiated no heat. She gestured for Mira to sit in a leather chair that had probably cost more than her entire apartment. 3 weeks ago, Ariel began, the Daybreak Coalition staged a coup. They flooded the Vampire Senate with ultraviolet bombs during a gathering. Most of the old council died instantly. Vesperian survived, but barely. He was disoriented, weakened, suffering from something close to amnesia. I remember fragments, Vesperian said quietly, standing by the cold fire. Centuries of memory, scattered like broken glass. I wandered for days, not knowing who or what I was, until I got on that bus. The act of being seen as human, Ariel continued, of receiving genuine kindness from someone who didn't know what you were, it grounded him, brought him back. Without that, I would have faded, Vesperian finished. Become one of the lost. A vampire without identity is a vampire without power. I would have dissolved by dawn. Myra's head spun. So, because I paid $2 for a bus fare, you owe me what? Protection? More than that, Ariel pulled a massive book from a shelf, leather-bound, pages edged in what looked like gold. Or dried blood. The life debt is sacred. Absolute. Vesperian cannot refuse to protect you without forfeiting his title, his power, and his very existence as a sovereign vampire. That seems excessive for a bus fare. It's not about the fare, Sable said from where she leaned against the door. It's about the intention. Pure, selfless kindness is rare, especially toward something that looks wrong. Your instincts should have told you to avoid him. But you helped anyway. Mira thought about that moment. The man's confusion. His trembling hands. The way everyone else on the bus had looked at him with suspicion or contempt. He looked lost, she said simply. Vesperian's expression softened. I was. And now my mother's paying for my kindness. Bitterness flooded Myra's voice. So, let's skip the ancient laws and vampire politics. How do we get her back? Ariel exchanged glances with Vesperian. That's complicated. Uncomplicated. The Daybreak Coalition has your mother in a secure facility, Ariel said carefully. They're using her as bait, yes, but also as leverage. They want Vesperian to surrender himself, to publicly abdicate and accept execution. So he surrenders, Mira said immediately. We trade. They'll kill you both anyway, Sable interjected. The moment they have what they want, you become loose ends. Dead loose ends. Then we fight. With what army? Sable pushed off from the door, her amber eyes blazing. We have 43 vampires left. The Coalition has hundreds of hunters, military-grade UV weapons, and legal authority to kill us on sight. This isn't a movie, girl. We don't have a magical solution. Then what do you have? Silence filled the room. Finally, Vesperian spoke.
A choice.
The life debt binds me to protect you, Mira. But it doesn't extend to your mother. I can keep you safe, hide you here, help you disappear, give you a new identity. You'll live. And my mother dies. Yes. Mira looked at each of them. Vampire King, Vampire Knight, Human Archivist. All watching her with expressions that ranged from sympathy to cold practicality. No, she said. Mira. No. She stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady. I don't care about life debts or ancient laws or vampire politics. That's my mother. She raised me alone, worked herself sick for me, and I am not abandoning her to die in some warehouse because I was too nice to a stranger. You'll die too, Sable said flatly. Then I die. Mira met Vesperian's red eyes. You said the debt binds you to protect me.
Fine.
Protect me by helping me save my mother. If you can't do that, then your debt means nothing. Vesperian stared at her for a long moment. Then impossibly he smiled, a real smile, small and sad and proud. You sound like a queen, he said softly. I sound like a daughter. He turned to Ariel. Gather everyone. Tell them we're planning a rescue. Vesperian, that's suicide. I know, he looked back at Mira. But she's right. A debt that only protects when it's convenient is no debt at all. We save her mother or we die trying. Sable groaned. I knew that bus fare was going to be trouble. But she was already moving toward the door, already preparing for war. And Mira, exhausted maid turned accidental catalyst, felt the weight of what she'd set in motion. 43 vampires against an army. A mother's life hanging in the balance. And a kindness on a bus that had changed everything. The crypt beneath the library smelled of earth and centuries. Mira descended the stone steps behind Vesperian, each footfall echoing in the vast darkness below. Candles ignited as they passed, not by hand, but by presence alone, as if the building itself recognized its king. This was the original court, Vesperian said, his voice carrying in the cavernous space. Built in 1847 by the First Crimson Council, back when vampires and humans had an understanding. The crypt opened into a chamber that stole Myra's breath. Vaulted ceilings stretched into shadow, supported by columns carved with the same shifting imagery as the front doors. A massive table dominated the center, black wood inlaid with silver patterns that formed a map of the city. Around it sat 13 chairs, though only 4 were occupied. The rest sat empty. Dust covered their armrests. 13 council members, Ariel explained softly beside Mira, each representing a different vampire bloodline. The UV bombs killed 9 of them instantly. 3 more fled to Europe. That leaves me, Vesperian finished. He took his place at the head of the table, and even diminished, even hunted, he looked like exactly what he was, a king in exile. And those loyal enough or foolish enough to stay. Sable dropped into a chair with casual irreverence. The other 3 vampires present studied Mira with varying degrees of hostility, curiosity, and hunger. You brought a human here? The speaker was a thin man with Victorian-era sideburns and eyes like chips of ice. To the heart chamber? I brought the reason we're still fighting, Vesperian replied. This is Mira-chan. She saved my life. A bus fare hardly seems. It was enough, Vesperian's voice cut like a blade. And now the Daybreak Coalition has her mother. They're using her as bait. The ice-eyed vampire laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Mira had been silent, watching, trying to understand the dynamics of a court she'd stumbled into. But something in that sneer, the casual dismissal, the arrogant certainty, ignited the anger she'd been holding back. He has more kingdom than you think, she said. Every eye turned to her. Excuse me? Ice Eyes leaned forward. I said he has more kingdom than you think. Myra's voice shook, but she didn't look away. I don't know anything about vampire politics. I don't know your laws or your history. But I know that 3 weeks ago, something terrible happened. And instead of running or hiding or giving up, 43 of you stayed. You stayed because you believe in something. We stayed because we had nowhere else to go, the platinum-haired vampire said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then leave now, Mira challenged. If all you are is survivors waiting to die anyway, then run. But if you're here because you think what happened to your Senate was wrong, if you're here because you believe your king is worth following, then help him prove it. By dying for your mother? Ice Eyes stood abruptly. Why should we care about one human woman? Because they knew exactly what she was when they took her, Vesperian said quietly, and something in his tone made everyone freeze. Think about it, Cassius. How did the coalition know to target Myra's mother? How did they know there was a connection? The platinum-haired vampire's eyes widened. They've been watching us. Since the bus. Since before the bus, Vesperian corrected. The coalition didn't just stage a coup. They've been infiltrating our world for years. Building files. Tracking movements. They knew I would be on that bus route. They knew I was disoriented and vulnerable. Then the girl. Cassius looked at Mira with new understanding. She wasn't random. No, Vesperian agreed. She works at the Crescent Hotel. Do you know who owns the Crescent Hotel? Silence. Then Sable swore softly. Marcus Dalton. Coalition board member. Mira works double shifts there. Cleans rooms. Invisible, unnoticed. With access to private conversations and discarded documents, Vesperian's red eyes met Myra's. They've been positioning you for months, haven't they? New assignments, rooms that just happened to host coalition meetings. Myra's blood went cold. The tech conference. Last month. Rosa said they requested specific maids. I thought it was because we were younger and her voice failed. They were testing you, Ariel said gently. Seeing if you'd report anything unusual. When you didn't, they marked you as either trustworthy or oblivious. But I don't understand, Mira whispered. Why me? Why set all this up? Because the life debt can be weaponized, Vesperian explained. If I'm bound to protect you, and you're someone they can control or eliminate, then I'm vulnerable in ways I haven't been for centuries. They engineered our meeting, Mira. They wanted me to be saved by someone they could use. The room spun. Every moment since that night on the bus took on new meaning. Every coincidence, every accident, all of it suddenly sinister. But their plan backfired, Sable said slowly, a predatory smile crossing her face. Because instead of getting a compliant pawn, they got someone with a spine. Someone who refuses to abandon her mother, Vesperian added. Someone who makes me want to honor the debt rather than resent it. Cassius sat back down, his expression thoughtful. So this isn't just a rescue mission. It's a message. Exactly. Vesperian placed his hands on the silver map. They think they've backed us into a corner. They think we'll either sacrifice Myra's mother and prove we're monsters, or attempt a doomed rescue and get slaughtered. Either way, they win. What's the third option? The platinum-haired vampire asked. Vesperian's smile was sharp and terrible. We don't just rescue Elise Chen. We expose them. Show the world what the Daybreak Coalition really is. Not heroes protecting humanity from monsters, but fanatics who murder and kidnap to maintain power. That's insane, Cassius said. But he was leaning forward now, interested. That's warfare, Vesperian corrected. Modern warfare isn't fought in shadows anymore. It's fought in the court of public opinion, on social media, in viral videos. The coalition operates in darkness, disguised as light. So we drag them into real light and let humans see what they've become. Myra's mind raced. The hotel. I have my security badge. I still have access to the servers, the guest records. If the coalition has been using the Crescent for meetings. Then there's evidence, Ariel finished. Paper trails. Financial records. Proof of their operations. And while Mira and Ariel gather evidence, Sable added, catching on, we stage the rescue. Make them respond. Force them to show their hand in public. They'll deny everything, Cassius warned. Let them try, Vesperian said. When we're done, the whole city will have seen them kidnap an innocent woman. Will have seen their weapons, their methods, their true nature. The vampires around the table exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. Finally, one by one, they nodded. It's still suicide, Cassius said. Yes, Vesperian agreed. But at least it's interesting suicide, Cassius actually smiled. When do we start? Now, Vesperian looked at Mira. Can you access the hotel tonight? I have the late shift tomorrow. But I could. Tonight, he repeated firmly. Every hour we wait is an hour they hurt your mother. Myra's throat tightened. She nodded. Then let's begin, Vesperian said. Not with a whimper, but with a war. The Crescent Hotel looked different at 2 a.m. The lobby's golden lights seemed dimmer, the shadows deeper, and the night security guard, Marcus, who usually waved Mira through with barely a glance, was gone. In his place sat a younger man with military posture and eyes that tracked Myra's every movement. "Employee entrance is closed for maintenance," he said. His hand rested casually near his hip, where a bulge under his jacket suggested something more than a flashlight. "Come back during regular hours." "I left my phone in my locker." Mira kept her voice steady, remembering Ariel's coaching. "Act normal." "Tired." "Just another overworked maid." "My mother's sick. I need it in case she calls." The guard studied her for a long moment. Then he picked up a phone, not the desk phone, but a cell, and spoke too quietly for her to hear. Myra's heart hammered. Through the lobby windows, she could see Sable waiting in the black car, ready to drive away if this went wrong. "Third floor access only," the guard finally said. 10 minutes. "Leave your bag here." "But my badge."
Leave your bag.
Mira set down her purse, acutely aware that her actual employee badge was tucked in her jacket pocket, the old one, from before the hotel updated its security system last month. Ariel had been confident it would still work on the older server room locks. Ariel had been confident about a lot of things. The elevator ride felt eternal. Mira watched the numbers climb. 1, 2, 3, and continued holding the button for 5. The floors the hotel used for administrative offices. The floors where coalition meetings happened. The elevator didn't stop at 3. The guard would notice, eventually, but she had minutes at most. The 5th floor was dark except for emergency lighting. Mira moved quickly past executive offices and conference rooms, heading for the server room at the end of the hall. Her old badge trembled in her hand as she swiped it. Green light. The lock clicked. Inside, banks of servers hummed in climate-controlled darkness. Mira pulled out the USB drive Ariel had given her. Small, black, unremarkable except for the silver etching along its side that looked like writing in a language Mira couldn't read. "Plug it into any terminal," Ariel had instructed. "The drive will do the rest. It'll copy everything: emails, financial records, security footage, meeting minutes. Everything we need to expose them." Mira found a terminal, her hands shaking as she inserted the drive. The screen flickered to life and immediately displayed. "Unauthorized access detected."
No, Mira whispered. No, no, no.
The screen went red. Alarm should have sounded, but the room stayed silent. A silence, somehow worse than noise. They weren't alerting the building. They were alerting something else. Mira yanked out the drive and ran. The elevator was too risky. She hit the stairwell, taking steps 2 at a time, her breath coming in gasps. Above her, she heard the door on the 7th floor bang open. Heavy footsteps. Multiple sets. She burst out on the 3rd floor and sprinted for the employee area. Her locker was real. Her story could still hold, but the hallway lights flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. "Mira-chan." The voice came from behind her.
Come.
"Professional." Mira turned slowly. 3 people stood in the hallway. The young guard from downstairs, flanked by 2 others in dark tactical gear. But it was the 4th figure that made Myra's stomach drop, a woman in an expensive suit, perhaps 50, with steel-gray hair and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "My name is Victoria Ashford," the woman said. "I run security operations for the Crescent Hotel. Among other things, I just wanted my phone." "Please don't insult us both." Victoria walked forward with measured steps. "We've been monitoring you since the parking lot incident. We know about the library. We know about Vesperian. And we know exactly what you just tried to do." One of the tactical officers pulled something from his belt, not a gun, but a cylindrical device that hummed with barely contained energy. UV emitter. Mira had seen what those did to vampires in the library's archive footage. 3 seconds of exposure, and they burned from the inside out. "Here's what's going to happen," Victoria continued. "You're going to come with us. Quietly.
Cooperatively.
And you're going to tell Vesperian that he has 24 hours to surrender himself to the Daybreak Coalition, or your mother dies. You already said that. Mira managed. In the warehouse. Through your message. That was the opening offer. Victoria's smile was cold. This is the final one. 24 hours, Mira. And just to make sure you understand, we're serious. She nodded to one of the officers, who pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Mira. The screen showed her mother. Elise was strapped to a chair in a concrete room, her face bruised, her breathing labored. But she was alive. Awake. As Mira watched, a figure in tactical gear entered the frame and said something that made Elise flinch. Stop, Mira gasped. Please stop. 24 hours, Victoria repeated. After that, we start removing fingers. Then we get creative. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. You think you're fighting for something noble, Mira? You're not. Vampires are parasites. Predators. Everything Vesperian has told you is a lie designed to make you complicit in your own species' extinction. He hasn't lied to me. Really? Has he told you how many humans he's killed? How many lives he's drained? Victoria's eyes bored into hers. The Crimson King has existed for 3 centuries. Do the math. Myra's certainty wavered. She thought of Vesperian's cold hands, his 2 sharp teeth, the casual way he dropped those attackers in the alley. What did she actually know about him? About any of them? I can see the doubt, Victoria said softly.
Good.
That means you're smart. Here's the truth, Mira. You're a child playing in a war between monsters. The kindest thing we can do is remove you from the board before you get hurt. By threatening my mother. By giving you a chance to walk away, Victoria straightened. Convince Vesperian to surrender. Save your mother. Go back to your normal life. We'll even arrange for better employment, full benefits, double your current salary. You could afford her medicine. Better treatment. A real future. It was tempting. God help her, it was tempting. And if I refuse? Victoria's expression hardened. Then you'll watch your mother die slowly, knowing you could have prevented it. And afterward, we'll kill you too. Vesperian's life debt will force him to try to save you, and we'll kill him as well. Everyone loses. Or, she pulled a card from her jacket, heavy paper, like the one that had appeared on Myra's doormat. But this card was white, with a phone number in black ink. You make the smart choice. 24 hours, Mira. Use them wisely. Victoria turned and walked away, her officers following. One of them grabbed Myra's arm, not roughly but firmly, and escorted her back to the lobby. Her purse was returned. The front door was opened. And just like that, she was outside, standing on the sidewalk at 2:37 a.m. with a white card burning in her pocket. Sable's car pulled up immediately. Get in, Sable hissed. We need to move. They were waiting for us, Mira said numbly as she slid into the passenger seat. They knew everything. Did you get the files? The drive triggered security. It was a trap. Mira stared at the white card. They gave me 24 hours to convince Vesperian to surrender. Sable swore viciously and peeled away from the curb. They're tightening the noose, making you the executioner. They offered me a deal. Money. Medicine for my mother. A way out. Sable's hands tightened on the wheel. Are you considering it? I don't know, the words came out broken. She asked me how many people Vesperian has killed. How many humans? In 3 centuries. Hundreds, Sable said bluntly. Maybe thousands. He's a vampire, Mira. That's what we are. What we do. Then how is he different from them? Sable was quiet for a long moment as the city blurred past. Finally, she said, he stopped. 50 years ago, when synthetic blood became available, Vesperian made it law, no feeding on unwilling humans. Any vampire who broke that law was exiled or destroyed. He gave up the hunt because he decided we could be more than predators. And the others? Some followed his example. Some didn't. But he tried, Mira. That's the difference. The coalition doesn't want to coexist. They want extinction. Every vampire dead No exceptions, no mercy, Sable glanced at her. So, yeah, Vesperian has blood on his hands. But he's trying to wash it off. That has to count for something. Mira looked at the white card again. 24 hours to betray a king, or watch her mother die. She closed her fist around it, crumpling it beyond recognition. Take me back to the library, she said. We need a new plan. Dawn was breaking when they returned to the library, painting the sky in shades of blood and amber. Mira watched the sunrise through the car window and wondered if it would be her last. 24 hours. The number kept echoing in her skull like a countdown clock. Inside, Vesperian was waiting in the entrance hall. He took one look at Myra's face and knew. It failed. It was a trap. Myra's voice came out flat, drained. They were waiting. They knew we'd try something. Of course they did. Vesperian turned away, and for the first time, Mira saw his shoulders slump. Not much, just a fraction, but enough to remind her that even vampire kings could feel defeat. I underestimated them. I thought we still had the advantage of unpredictability. They gave me a message. Mira pulled out the crumpled white card. 24 hours. You surrender, or my mother dies. And they offered you something in return. It wasn't a question.
Money. Safety.
A way out. Mira met his eyes. They told me how many humans you've killed.
Hundreds, Sable said.
Maybe thousands. Vesperian didn't flinch. Yes. Just yes?
No explanation?
No excuse? What excuse could possibly matter? He moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the growing light. I've lived 317 years, Mira. For the first 260, I was exactly what they say I am, a predator. A monster. I hunted, I fed, I killed when it suited me. Then why should I trust you? You shouldn't, he turned back to her, and his red eyes held something she hadn't seen before, shame. If I were you, I'd take their offer. Save your mother. Live your life. Let monsters settle their own wars. That's it? You're giving up? I'm being realistic. Vesperian's voice carried the weight of centuries. The life debt binds me to protect you, but I cannot save your mother. Not against those odds. Not without an army I don't have and resources I've lost. The kindest thing I can do is release you from this mess. You can't release me. Myra's hands clenched into fists. You said the debt is binding. Absolute. You don't get to quit because it's inconvenient. I'm trying to save your life. By letting my mother die, the words exploded out of her. She's the only family I have. She worked herself sick to raise me alone. She never complained, never asked for help, never stopped trying even when her lungs started failing. And now she's strapped to a chair in some warehouse, being tortured because I was nice to a stranger. Silence filled the hall. You're right, Vesperian said quietly. This is my fault. Your kindness on that bus should have been rewarded with safety, not danger. Instead, I've destroyed your life. Stop it, Myra's voice broke. Stop making this about your guilt. I need you to be a king right now, not a martyr. I haven't been a king for weeks. Then start now. Mira stepped toward him, surprising herself with her own fury. You want to know why I helped you on that bus? It wasn't because you looked human or safe or trustworthy. It was because you looked lost. Broken. Like you'd forgotten who you were. And I know what that feels like. Vesperian stared at her. Every day I put on that uniform and become invisible, Mira continued. Every day I scrub other people's messes and smile at guests who don't know my name. I'm 23 years old and I feel ancient because I've forgotten how to be anything except tired. So when I saw you standing there, confused and alone, I recognized it. And I thought maybe, just maybe, one small kindness could matter. It did matter, Vesperian said softly. It brought me back. Then prove it, Myra's voice steadied. Show me that the king who came back is worth saving. Show me that my kindness meant something more than getting my mother killed. They stood there in the growing light, vampire king and exhausted maid, both broken in different ways. There might be a way, Vesperian finally said. Not a good way. Not a safe way. But away. Tell me. He led her to the study where they'd first spoken. Ariel was already there, along with Sable and Cassius. A map covered the table, not the silver one from the crypt, but a modern tactical display showing the city's warehouse district. The Coalition is holding your mother here, Vesperian pointed to a building near the port. Warehouse 7. It's a legitimate shipping facility by day, a Coalition stronghold by night. 24-hour security, UV emitters at every entrance, and enough firepower to level a city block. Can't be done, Cassius said flatly. Even if we got inside, we'd be ash before we reached her. Not if humans lead the assault, Ariel interjected. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept. Vampires can't approach the building, but humans can. The UV emitters are designed to filter out vampire signatures, not human ones. You want me to walk into a Coalition base, Mira said slowly. Not alone, Vesperian traced a route on the map. Ariel will go with you. She has contacts, human sympathizers within the Coalition who've been feeding us information for years. They can get you inside. And then what? I just ask nicely for my mother back. You broadcast. Sable tapped the map. Live stream everything. The torture, the weapons, the entire operation. Force them to operate in public view. They'll either have to let you both go or prove to the world exactly what they are. They could just kill us before we broadcast anything. They could, Vesperian agreed. But they won't. Not immediately. Because Victoria Ashford doesn't just want to win, she wants to be right. She wants to prove that vampires are monsters and she's the hero. She'll want to debate you, convince you, show you evidence. It's a psychological operation. That's a lot of assumptions. It is, Ariel said gently. But it's the only play we have. And while you're inside providing distraction, we'll be positioning for extraction. The moment you have your mother, you signal us. We breach, grab you both, and run.
We.
Mira looked at Vesperian. UV emitters will kill you on contact. Which is why I'll be wearing protection, he nodded to Sable, who pulled a case from beneath the table. Inside were suits that looked like something between hazmat gear and medieval armor. Silver fabric reinforced with metal plates, helmets with darkened visors. Lead-lined with UV-resistant alloys, Sable explained. Won't last long under direct fire, but long enough to get in and out. Maybe, Mira repeated. It's the best we can do. Vesperian's red eyes met hers with absolute honesty. I won't lie to you, Mira. The chances of all of us surviving this are minimal. But if we don't try, your mother dies for certain. At least this way, she has a chance.
Mira looked at the map.
At the building where her mother was being held. At the impossible odds and the desperate plan. When do we leave? 2 hours, Vesperian said. The Coalition is expecting a response within 24 hours. We attack at noon, when they're least expecting it. When the sun is highest and they think we're weakest. Poetic, Cassius muttered. Necessary, Vesperian corrected. He looked at each of them in turn. If any of you want to leave, now is the time.
No judgment. No scam.
This is a suicide mission, and I won't ask anyone to die for my mistakes. No one moved. Then we prepare. Vesperian's voice carried the authority of centuries. And we show the Daybreak Coalition what it means to threaten a king's debt. Mira felt something shift in her chest, fear mixing with determination, terror blending with purpose. She thought of her mother's face on that screen, bruised but unbroken. 24 hours had become 2. And somewhere in a warehouse by the port, a war was about to begin. Let's bring her home, Mira said. The words felt like a promise. Or an epitaph. The plan lasted exactly 11 minutes. They were supposed to approach Warehouse 7 quietly, through back channels, using Ariel's contacts to slip inside unnoticed. They were supposed to have time to set up the broadcast, to position themselves strategically, to control the narrative. Instead, the Coalition was waiting for them 3 blocks away, in the middle of the afternoon market district. It's an ambush, Sable snarled as their vehicle screeched to a halt. Ahead, the street was blocked by Coalition vans, Matte black, windows tinted, the kind of vehicles that screamed government operation. They moved the timetable up. Or they never intended to wait, Vesperian said grimly. Around them, the market was in full swing. Vendors selling produce, family shopping, street musicians playing for tips. Hundreds of witnesses. They're forcing us into a public confrontation. We should retreat, Cassius urged. Regroup, find another. The side door of the nearest van opened. Victoria Ashford stepped out, impeccable in a tailored suit despite the afternoon heat. Behind her came a dozen operatives in tactical gear, and between them, Mom. Mira lunged for the door, but Sable's hand clamped on her shoulder. Wait, Sable hissed. Elise Chen looked smaller than Mira remembered. They dressed her in a hospital gown, making her look frail, victimized. Her face bore fresh bruises, and she moved with the careful stiffness of someone in pain. But her eyes blazed with fury when she saw Mira. Let her go, Elise shouted, her voice carrying across the market. Heads turned. Phones came out. My daughter has nothing to do with this. Victoria held up a hand, and an operative pressed something against Elise's neck, a UV emitter, modified for contact use. Elise gasped but didn't scream. Everyone stay calm, Victoria announced, her voice amplified by some unseen device. The market froze. My name is Victoria Ashford, and I'm with a special government task force investigating supernatural terrorism. We have reason to believe there are vampires in this area, targeting civilians. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people started backing away. Others moved closer, phones held high, recording everything. This is a circus, Vesperian muttered. She's turning us into a spectacle. Then we give them a better show, Mira said suddenly. Before anyone could stop her, she opened the car door and stepped out. Mira, no. But she was already walking toward Victoria, her hands visible and empty, her voice loud enough to carry. That's my mother. She's not a vampire. She's not a terrorist. She's a sick woman you kidnapped to get to me. Victoria's smile was thin. And why would we want to get to you, Miss Chen? Because I helped someone you're afraid of. Mira kept walking, aware of every phone camera tracking her movement, every witness watching this unfold. A man who was lost and confused. I paid his bus fare. That's it. That's my crime. You aided a known vampire sovereign. I helped a stranger who needed help. Myra's voice cracked with genuine emotion. I didn't know what he was. I just saw someone who looked lost, and I did what any decent person would do. And you responded by terrorizing my family. The crowd was fully engaged now. Mira could hear the murmurs shifting, questions being asked. This wasn't what they'd expected. No monsters, no violence. Just a young woman defending her mother. Victoria's expression tightened. This wasn't going according to her script. The man you helped is Vesperian, the Crimson King, Victoria said, trying to regain control. A vampire responsible for countless human deaths over 3 centuries. By protecting him, you've made yourself an accomplice too. I'm not protecting him. Mira turned to look back at the car, at Vesperian's silhouette visible through the windshield. I'm protecting my mother. There's a difference. Then tell him to surrender, Victoria countered. Tell the Crimson King to face justice for his crimes, and your mother goes free. Mira felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. She thought about the white card, the offer of safety, the easy way out. Then she thought about Vesperian in the library, about the shame in his voice when he'd admitted his past, about how he'd changed his laws 50 years ago because he'd decided to be better. Justice, Mira said slowly, would be investigating why a government task force is kidnapping civilians and using them as bait. Justice would be asking why you're so afraid of vampires who've been trying to coexist peacefully that you staged a massacre in their Senate. Victoria's face went cold. Careful, Miss Chen. No, you be careful, Myra's voice rose. Because every person here is recording this. Every phone is live streaming. And they're all watching you threaten an unarmed woman and her sick mother in broad daylight. So tell me, who's the monster here? The market erupted. Not in panic, but in voices, people shouting questions, demanding answers, the crowd's mood shifting from fear to outrage. Victoria made a gesture, and the operatives moved forward. That's when Vesperian stepped out of the car. The effect was immediate. The afternoon sun should have been his enemy, but he stood in it like he owned the light itself. His skin didn't burn or smoke. Those were myths, Mira realized, but it did seem paler, more translucent, highlighting the inhuman beauty of his features. "Victoria Ashford," he said, his voice carrying without amplification. "I accept your terms. My life for the woman's freedom."
No.
Mira spun toward him. That wasn't the plan. Plans change. He walked past her, his movements measured and deliberate. "You were right, Mira. Being a king means making the hard choices." But something was wrong. Mira saw it in Sable's sudden tension, in Cassius emerging from the car with weapons Mira couldn't name. This wasn't surrender. This was strategy. Vesperian stopped 10 feet from Victoria, within range of the UV emitters mounted on the coalition vans. "Release Elise Chen, and I'll come peacefully." Victoria studied him with cold calculation. "And your followers?" "Given safe passage."
No pursuit. No retaliation.
"Done." Victoria gestured, and 2 operatives began unlocking Elise's restraints. That's when the first shot rang out. Not from the coalition, from a rooftop across the market. The bullet caught one of Victoria's operatives in the shoulder, spinning him around. The UV emitter he'd been holding clattered to the ground. Chaos erupted. People screamed and scattered. More shots came from different angles, calculated, precise, targeting only coalition operatives. Sable and Cassius moved like liquid shadow, using the panic as cover to reach the vans. "You planned this," Victoria snarled at Vesperian. "You brought reinforcements." "I brought witnesses," Vesperian corrected. "The shooters aren't mine." He was right. Mira saw them now, humans in civilian clothes, positioned in windows and on rooftops, using hunting rifles and sporting goods. Not military precision, but angry determination.
Irréels contact.
The human sympathizers. An operative raised a UV emitter toward Vesperian, but before he could fire, one of the civilians shot him in the leg. The emitter discharged wildly, its beam scorching the pavement and sending up smoke that smelled like burnt metal. Mira. Sable had reached Elise, cutting through the last restraint. "Get her out." Mira ran. She grabbed her mother's arm, supporting her weight, pulling her away from the vans and toward the edge of the market. Behind them, Vesperian was still standing his ground, creating a distraction, drawing coalition fire while his people evacuated. "My baby," Elise gasped, tears streaming down her bruised face. "My baby, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize. Just run." They made it to an alley between vendor stalls when Mira heard her mother's sharp intake of breath. She turned back. A coalition operative had broken through, UV emitter raised. But he wasn't aiming at Vesperian. He was aiming at a child, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, frozen in terror in the middle of the market square.
No.
Mira didn't think. She sprinted back, grabbed the child, and pulled her behind a vendor stall just as the UV beam fired. It missed them by inches, scorching a hole through a fruit cart that immediately caught fire. The operative approached, reloading his weapon. "Collateral damage," he muttered. Then a shadow fell over him. Vesperian appeared behind the operative with impossible speed. No dramatic movements, no ceremony, just swift, clinical efficiency. The man dropped unconscious. "You came back," Vesperian said, looking at Mira with something like wonder. "So did you," Mira replied, still holding the terrified child. Around them, the market was in full chaos. But the phones were still recording, still broadcasting. The world was watching. "Get them out," Vesperian ordered Sable, who had appeared with Elise and Cassius. "All of them. Civilians first. And you?" "I end this." He turned toward Victoria Ashford, who stood among her fallen operatives, her perfect composure finally cracking. This isn't over, Victoria spat. No, Vesperian agreed. It's just beginning. The underground court hadn't been used in 50 years. Mira could smell it in the dust that rose with every footstep, see it in the cobwebs that draped the ancient throne like funeral shrouds. But tonight, the crypt beneath the library blazed with candlelight as vampires gathered from hiding places across the city. More than 43 now. Word of the Market District confrontation had spread like wildfire through the supernatural underground. By sunset, 70 vampires had arrived. By midnight, the number had swelled past 100. Mira sat in a corner with her mother, both wrapped in blankets despite the crypt's stagnant warmth. Elise hadn't stopped shaking since Ariel had examined her injuries, bruised ribs, minor burns from the UV contact, and lungs that sounded worse than ever. You should be in a hospital, Mira whispered. So should you. Elise touched her daughter's face with trembling fingers. What have you gotten yourself into, baby? I'm not sure anymore. Mira watched the vampires gathering around the 13-seat table. They moved with predatory grace, spoke in languages she didn't recognize, and looked at her with expressions ranging from gratitude to barely concealed hunger. But I think it's too late to get out. It's never too late. Elise squeezed her hand. We can disappear. Change our names. I have some money saved. $300 in a coffee tin under the sink. I know, Mira smiled sadly. It's not enough to run from this, Mom. Vesperian stood at the head of the table, still wearing the same clothes from the market, now stained with blood that wasn't his own. He'd been standing there for an hour, letting the vampires arrive, letting them see him, letting them remember what it meant to have a king. Finally, he spoke. The Daybreak Coalition drew blood in daylight, Vesperian announced, his voice carrying through the crypt. They attacked civilians. They fired weapons in a crowded market. They tried to kill a human child on camera. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. By tomorrow morning, footage of the incident will have reached every news station, every social media platform, every government office in the country. The coalition wanted to paint us as monsters. Vesperian's red eyes swept the crowd. Instead, they revealed themselves. Pretty speech, a voice called out. An older vampire with scars across his face stood from the gathering. But it changes nothing. We're still hunted.
Still dying.
Your grand plan to expose them got 13 vampires killed today. Mira flinched. She hadn't known the body count. 13 dead, Vesperian agreed. Against hundreds of human witnesses who now question the coalition's narrative. Against millions who watched live streams of government operatives trying to murder a child. The cost was high, Marcus, but the gain was necessary. Necessary? Marcus laughed bitterly. You sacrificed our people for public opinion? Since when do humans care about vampire rights? Since we gave them a reason to, Vesperian gestured to Mira. This is Mira-chan. 3 nights ago, she paid my bus fare. Yesterday, she risked her life to save her mother. Today, she threw herself in front of a UV beam to protect a human child she'd never met. She did all of this despite knowing what we are, despite having every reason to hate us. Every eye in the crypt turned to Mira.
She wanted to disappear.
I didn't do it for you, Mira said quietly. I did it because it was right. Exactly, Vesperian said. That's the point. Humans aren't inherently our enemies, just as we aren't inherently monsters. The coalition survives on fear and hatred. So we show them something different. We show them cooperation. By making this Maid our symbol, another vampire spoke up, the platinum-haired one from before, whose name Mira still didn't know. She's a liability. The coalition will target her forever now. Everyone she loves becomes a weapon against us. Then we protect her, Vesperian stated simply. We can't even protect ourselves. The crypt erupted in argument. Vampires shouting over each other, some defending Vesperian's strategy, others demanding they flee the city, still others calling for direct retaliation against the coalition. Mira sat frozen, overwhelmed by the chaos she'd helped create. Her mother's hand tightened around hers. This isn't your fault, Elise whispered. Yes, it is, Mira watched Vesperian try to restore order, watched centuries-old vampires argue like children, and felt the weight of it crushing her. I started this. I paid that stupid bus fare, and now people are dying. You showed kindness to someone who needed it. That's never stupid. It is when it gets people killed. Elise was quiet for a moment. Then, your father used to say that the world punishes kindness because kindness is dangerous. It's easy to hate, easy to hurt, but being kind, being genuinely kind when the world gives you every reason not to be, that takes courage. And courage scares people. Mira looked at her mother, sick, exhausted, traumatized, yet somehow still finding strength to offer comfort.
I'm scared, Mom. Good.
That means you're still sane. Elise managed a weak smile. But being scared and being brave aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing. A crash echoed through the crypt. Marcus had overturned one of the 13 chairs, and now he stood facing Vesperian with bared fangs. You're not fit to lead us, Marcus snarled. You've gone soft.
Weak.
You care more about this human than about your own people. I care about all people, Vesperian corrected. That's what leadership means. Leadership means strength. Power. Not cowering in crypts while humans hunt us to extinction. Marcus gestured to the assembled vampires. Who here thinks the Crimson King has failed us? Who thinks we deserve better? Hands began to rise. Not all of them, maybe a third, but enough to fracture the already fragile unity. You want to challenge me? Vesperian's voice went deadly quiet.
Fine. Do it properly.
Invoke the old law. We'll settle this the way our kind has for millennia. Gladly, Marcus smiled, showing too many teeth. Wait. Mira found herself standing, her voice cutting through the tension. Just wait. The vampires stared at her. I know I'm just a human, Mira continued, her legs shaking. I don't understand your laws or your politics. But I understand that you're scared. I understand that you've lost people. I lost my entire normal life 3 days ago, and I'm furious about it. Then why are you still here? Marcus demanded. Because running doesn't fix anything. Mira looked at Vesperian. You asked me earlier what I wanted. I'll tell you now, I want safety for my mother. I want justice for the people who died today. And I want, she paused, gathering courage. I want to matter. Not because I'm special or chosen or anything magical, but because I'm just a regular person who tried to help, and that should mean something. Silence filled the crypt. The girl speaks wisdom, an ancient voice croaked. An elderly vampire, Mira, hadn't noticed before rose from the shadows. She looked impossibly old, her skin like parchment, her eyes filmed with cataracts. The human reminds us what we've forgotten. Which is? Marcus challenged. That power without purpose is just violence. The elderly vampire moved to the table with painful slowness. I am Helena, last of the first council. I watched this court rise from blood and darkness. I watched it nearly fall to the same, her clouded eyes fixed on Vesperian. You've changed, boy. When you took the throne 2 centuries ago, you were ruthless, merciless. Now you speak of cooperation and kindness. People change, Vesperian said.
Yes.
The question is whether we change for the better or simply become something else. Helena turned to the assembly. I invoke the right of assembly. Let this court decide. Do we follow Vesperian's path of cooperation, or do we return to the old ways of power and fear? You can't, Marcus started. I can. I was here when these rules were written. Helena's voice, though frail, carried absolute authority. All in favor of the Crimson King's continued rule, stand to the right. All opposed, stand to the left. Neutrality is abstention. The vampires began to move. Slowly at first, then with more certainty. Mira watched as they divided themselves, choosing sides in a conflict she'd inadvertently created. When the movement stopped, the count was devastating. 38 vampires stood on Vesperian's right. 42 stood on Marcus's left. 23 remained in the center, refusing to choose. Marcus smiled triumphantly. The court has spoken. No, Helena said. The court has shown division. And a divided court cannot rule. She looked at Mira with those clouded eyes. By the old law, when a court divides evenly, the deciding vote falls to an outsider. Someone with no stake in vampire politics. Someone who can judge fairly. Myra's blood went cold. What? You, child. You cast the deciding vote. Helena's smile was ancient and terrible. Do we follow the king who saved you? Or do we replace him with one who promises strength? Every vampire in the crypt stared at Mira. The weight of their gazes felt like drowning. And Mira, exhausted maid turned accidental kingmaker, had to choose the fate of them all. No, the word came out barely as a whisper. Mira shook her head, backing away from Helena. No, I can't. I don't have the right to. You have the only right that matters, Helena interrupted. You're the one who started this. Now you end it. By choosing who leads you? Myra's voice rose in pitch.
I'm nobody.
I clean hotel rooms. I can't decide. Then the court remains divided, Marcus said smoothly. Which means Vesperian has no mandate. No authority. His reign is over. That's not how the old law works, Sable interjected. If she refuses to vote, the challenge defaults to trial by combat. Vesperian and Marcus fight until one yields or dies. Marcus smiled. Even better.
No.
Mira surprised herself with the force of it. She stepped forward, her mother's hand slipping from hers. Nobody else dies because of my bus fare. Then vote, Helena said simply. Mira looked at Vesperian. His expression gave nothing away, no pleading, no pressure, just patient acceptance. He'd let her choose, whatever she decided. She looked at Marcus. Hungry, eager, already imagining himself on the throne. You want strength, Mira said to Marcus. Power. The old ways. I want survival, Marcus corrected. Your king's compassion is beautiful, but it won't stop UV bullets. It won't prevent the coalition from wiping us out. And your way will. My way will make them fear us again, Marcus's eyes blazed. Remind them that we are predators. That we ruled the night for millennia before they invented their weapons. By killing humans. By being what we are, he spread his hands. I don't hate humans, girl. But I won't pretend we're equals. We're stronger, faster, immortal. Why should we hide from prey? Murmurs of agreement rippled through his supporters. Vesperian, Mira turned to him. What happens if I vote for you? I continue trying to build bridges, he said quietly. Convince humans that coexistence is possible. Reform our laws, our methods. Probably fail, but fail trying to be better. And if you fail, we all die anyway. But at least we die trying to be more than monsters. Mira felt tears burning her eyes. This was impossible. Either choice led to death. Marcus's path through war and genocide, Vesperian's through naive hope that humans would accept them. But one path tried. One path believed things could change. I vote. The crypt's entrance exploded. Not with fire, but with light. Pure, searing ultraviolet light that flooded the chamber like artificial sun. Vampires screamed. Those closest to the entrance began to smoke, their skin blistering and cracking. Back. Sable shoved Mira toward the rear of the crypt. Everyone back. Coalition operatives poured through the breach, wearing full UV-resistant suits, their weapons blazing with more of that terrible light. The crypt descended into chaos, vampires fleeing, some trying to fight back, others simply burning where they stood. How did they find us? Cassius roared, pulling a UV-burned vampire to safety behind a pillar. Me, the voice came from above. Mira looked up and saw one of the neutral vampires, a young man she didn't recognize, standing on a balcony with a small device in his hand. I led them here. The coalition promised immunity if I delivered the court. Traitor. Marcus lunged for the balcony, but a UV beam caught him mid-leap. He screamed, his trajectory faltering, and crashed to the ground with smoke rising from his charred skin. Victoria Ashford entered through the breach, her suit pristine despite the carnage. Vesperian. Her amplified voice cut through the screams. Surrender yourself, and we'll stop the assault. Everyone else lives. He's lying. Sable had her weapons out. Guns that fired something other than bullets, rounds that exploded into darkness when they hit coalition suits. They'll kill us all anyway. But the vampires were dying. Mira could see bodies turning to ash, centuries of life ending in seconds. The ancient Helena collapsed near the table, her papery skin crumbling. Stop. Mira found herself running forward, toward Victoria, toward the light that could kill her just as easily. Stop, please, just stop. Victoria raised a hand. The assault paused. Mira Chin, Victoria's voice carried something almost like regret. You could have taken the deal. Could have walked away. Let them go, Mira gasped. You want Vesperian?
Fine. Take him.
But let the others leave. I admire your compassion.
Truly, Victoria stepped closer.
But we're past the point of negotiation. You made your choice in the market. You sided with monsters. They're not. They are. Victoria's voice hardened. And so, by extension, are you. An operative grabbed Mira, hauling her backward. She struggled, but human strength meant nothing against military training. Another operative secured her mother, who'd been hiding behind a pillar. Mira, Vesperian moved toward her, but 3 UV beams converged on his position. He froze, smoke already rising from his coat. Don't, Mira screamed. Don't come closer, you'll die. For the first time, she saw genuine fear in his ancient eyes. Not for himself, for her. The Crimson King and his little savior, Victoria announced. How poetic. We'll make examples of you both, she gestured to her operatives. Secure them. Kill anyone who resists. Wait. The shout came from an unexpected source. Iriel emerged from the shadows, hands raised in surrender. Behind her came a dozen humans, the sympathizers from the market. Take me instead. I'm the one who organized the resistance. I'm the one who fed you false information.
Victoria paused.
Ariel Moss. Yes, we have quite the file on you. 22 years embedded with vampires. The ultimate traitor to your species. Then I'm worth more than a maid and her sick mother, Iriel said calmly. Let them go. Take me. How noble, Victoria actually smiled. But I think I'll take all of you. The girl who started it, the archivist who enabled it, and the king who allowed it. A complete set. Operatives moved to secure Iriel. The sympathizers tried to fight back, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Within minutes, Iriel was restrained beside Mira and her mother. The rest of you, Victoria addressed the surviving vampires, have until sunrise to leave the city. Stay, and we carpet bomb every known sanctuary with UV ordnance. This is your only warning. You can't, Vesperian started. A UV beam hit him square in the chest. He collapsed, his chest smoking, his face contorted in agony. He wasn't dead, not yet, but he was dying. Mom, Mira screamed as operatives dragged her toward the entrance. Vesperian, I'm sorry, her mother sobbed beside her. Baby, I'm so sorry. They were hauled up the stairs, through the library that was already burning, coalition operatives methodically setting fires, destroying centuries of history. Outside, black vans waited with open doors like hungry mouths. Mira caught one last glimpse of the crypt, vampires fleeing through secret exits, bodies turning to ash. And Vesperian, still alive but broken, being restrained by operatives in UV-resistant suits. Their eyes met across the distance.
I'm sorry, Mira mouthed.
I'm so sorry. He smiled, sad, gentle, forgiving. Then a hood was shoved over Myra's head, and the world went dark. She heard her mother crying, Iriel's calm voice offering comfort, the rumble of engines starting. The van lurched forward, carrying them away from the burning library, away from the dying vampires, away from any hope of rescue. Where are we going? Myra's voice was muffled by the hood. Victoria's answer came from somewhere close. To show the world what happens to those who choose monsters over humanity. The van drove on through the night. And Mira, who had once paid a simple bus fare out of kindness, realized too late that some debts could never be repaid. Only collected. In the ruins of the library, among the ash and smoke, Sable pulled a semi-conscious Vesperian through a secret passage. Cassius supported Helena, who'd somehow survived. 23 vampires escaped into the tunnels beneath the city. 23 out of over 100. We failed, Cassius said bitterly. No, Vesperian rasped, his burned chest healing too slowly. She gave us something more valuable than victory. What? Proof that humans worth saving, he coughed, smoke rising from his lungs. And now we save them back.
How?
We're broken, scattered. Then we rebuild. Vesperian's red eyes blazed through the pain. They took Mira. They took her mother. They took Uriel, his voice strengthened. They made this personal. Sable smiled, sharp and dangerous. When do we strike? Now, Vesperian said. We strike now. The king was wounded. But not defeated. Not yet. The Daybreak Coalition headquarters wasn't a fortress. It was a television studio. Mira understood the strategy the moment they removed her hood. They weren't in some secret bunker or underground facility. They were in a broadcast center in downtown, surrounded by cameras, lighting rigs, and production equipment. Coalition operatives moved with the efficiency of a TV crew, positioning cameras, adjusting microphones. We're live in 20 minutes, Victoria announced, checking her appearance in a monitor. This needs to look professional. Mira sat in a chair on a raised platform, her hands zip-tied in front of her. Her mother was beside her, struggling to breathe without her medication. Uriel sat on Myra's other side, unnaturally calm despite their circumstances. What is this? Mira asked.
Democracy, Victoria replied.
Or the appearance of it, which is the same thing. We're going to broadcast your confession, how you were seduced by vampire lies, how you endangered civilians, how you chose monsters over humanity. The people will see. They'll understand. And they'll support our final solution to the vampire problem. Final solution. Ariel's voice was flat. You hear yourself, right? You sound like someone willing to do what's necessary. Victoria crouched before them, her expression almost sympathetic. I know you think we're the villains. But 50 years ago, vampires nearly took over 3 major cities. They infiltrated governments, replaced officials, fed on thousands. We pushed them back, forced them underground, and established the Senate as a compromise. But compromises don't work with predators. Vesperian changed the laws, Mira argued. Made it illegal to feed on unwilling humans. And you believe that?
Victoria laughed.
He's 300 years old, Mira. Do you honestly think he stopped being a monster because of synthetic blood? That's not evolution, it's marketing. I've worked with him for 22 years, Uriel interjected. Never once did he. You're a victim of Stockholm Syndrome. It's tragic, really, Victoria stood, adjusting her suit. But don't worry. After tonight, this all ends. The world will see the truth, the vampires will be eradicated, and humanity will finally be safe. Safe. Mira looked at the cameras, the lights, the operatives preparing for broadcast. This isn't about safety. It's about control. Same thing. Victoria walked away, leaving them under guard. Myra's mind raced. They had no weapons, no allies, no plan. Even if they escaped the studio, where would they go? The library was destroyed, the vampires scattered. Vesperian was probably dead or dying. Baby, Elise whispered. I need you to listen. When they start the broadcast, I want you to tell them whatever they want to hear. Confess. Apologize. Whatever keeps you alive. Mom. I'm not asking, Elise's voice broke.
I'm dying anyway.
My lungs are failing, we both know it. But you can survive this. You can have a life. So please just tell them what they want. Tears burned Myra's eyes. I can't lie about Vesperian. About any of them. Even if it saves you. Especially then. Elise started to respond, but a coughing fit cut her off, violent, wet, her whole body convulsing. An operative moved forward, but Ariel shook her head sharply. She needs medicine, Ariel said. Her inhaler. It's in her pocket. After the broadcast, the operative replied. She could die before then. Then she dies. The operative's expression remained neutral. We only need 2 of you for the show. Cold rage flooded through Mira. Her mother was suffocating, and they didn't care. She was a prop. They all were, just pieces in Victoria's performance of justice. 5 minutes, someone called. The lights intensified. Cameras moved into position. Victoria returned, now wearing makeup, her hair perfect. A professional propagandist ready for prime time. Any last words before we start? Victoria asked almost kindly. Mira looked at the cameras, at the red lights that would soon indicate live broadcast, at the thousands, maybe millions who would watch. Yeah, Mira said. I have something to say.
Victoria smiled.
Good. That's good. Cooperation makes this easier for everyone. I'm not cooperating, Mira met her eyes. I'm warning you. Warning me. Victoria's smile didn't waver. About what? About what happens when you back kindness into a corner. The lights went red. They were live. Victoria composed herself, turning to address the cameras with practiced poise. Good evening. I'm Victoria Ashford, Director of Special Operations for the Daybreak Coalition. Tonight, we bring you undeniable proof of vampire infiltration. The studio lights died. Not flickered, died. Plunged into absolute darkness except for the emergency exit signs. The cameras went black. The monitors showed static. What the hell? Victoria spun. Get the backup generators. The emergency lights exploded in showers of glass. Now the darkness was complete, broken only by the glow of phones and equipment LEDs. Operatives scrambled, flashlights clicking on, weapons raised. Secure the exits.
Victoria shouted.
This is a coordinated attack. A voice cut through the darkness. Deep, resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. You should have let them go. Vesperian stepped into the circle of flashlight beams. He looked dead. Should have been dead. His chest bore massive burns, his clothes were shredded, and smoke still rose from his skin. But his eyes blazed red with a fury Mira had never seen. Open fire.
Victoria commanded.
UV beams lanced through the darkness. But Vesperian wasn't alone. Sable appeared from the shadows, throwing devices that exploded into clouds of something dark and viscous that absorbed the UV light. Cassius dropped from the ceiling rigging, his movements inhumanly fast. Other vampires emerged from every corner, the 23 survivors, attacking with desperate precision. Protect the prisoners, an operative shouted, but it was chaos. Vampires and humans fighting in near-total darkness, UV beams strobing like lightning, bodies falling. Mira felt hands on her restraints, human hands warm. One of Ariel's sympathizers, a young woman with kind eyes. Go, the woman whispered, cutting Mira free. Back exit, through the prop room. My mother. I've got her. Go. But Mira didn't go. She grabbed her mother, supporting her weight, and turned to Ariel. Can you walk?
I've fine.
Move. They stumbled toward the back of the studio, but Victoria appeared before them, UV emitter in hand. You're not leaving. Victoria raised the weapon, not at them, at the vampires fighting her operatives. One move, and I flood this whole studio with UV radiation. Everyone dies. Then do it, Mira said. Victoria's finger tightened on the trigger. Do it, Mira shouted. Show everyone watching what you really are. No one's watching. The broadcast is dead. Is it? Ariel smiled. Check your phone. Victoria pulled out her phone, and her face went white. The broadcast wasn't dead. The studio cameras were down, yes, but phones were up. Dozens of phones held by sympathizers, by captured vampires, by operatives who'd secretly recorded everything. all streaming live to social media platforms, news sites, everywhere. The world was watching. They'd seen Victoria refuse medicine to a dying woman, seen operatives threaten prisoners, seen the coalition attack first. "You set this up," Victoria whispered. "We learned from you," Ariel replied. "Control the narrative." Vesperian appeared beside Mira, his presence both terrifying and reassuring. "It's over, Victoria. Surrender, and you live." "Live as what? A failure?" Victoria laughed. A broken sound. "Everything I've built, everything we've accomplished, was based on lies," Vesperian finished. "And now the truth is exposed." Victoria looked at her operatives. Several had lowered their weapons. Others were staring at their phones, watching the streams, seeing their own actions broadcast to millions. The UV emitter fell from Victoria's hand. "It's over," she whispered. 3 hours later, Mira sat in an ambulance while paramedics treated her mother. Police had swarmed the studio, real police, not coalition operatives. Media helicopters circled overhead. And at the center of it all stood Vesperian, giving an interview to a reporter brave enough to approach him. "The Crimson Court seeks coexistence," he was saying. "We ask for the same rights granted to any sentient being, recognition, protection under law, and the freedom to exist without persecution." "And in exchange," the reporter asked, "complete transparency, public registry of all vampires, annual audits, human oversight councils. We will prove we can be more than humanity's nightmares." Sable appeared beside Myra's ambulance. "He's really doing it, rebuilding in public view." "Will it work?" Mira asked. "Maybe. Maybe not. But it's better than hiding." Sable looked at her. "You started this, you know. One bus fare, and you changed everything. I just wanted to help." "That's what made it powerful," Sable smiled. "Genuine for once. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped."
No agenda, no calculation.
"Just kindness. That's rarer than you think." Vesperian finished his interview and approached. He looked exhausted, his burns still healing, but there was something different in his bearing. Not a king in exile anymore. Just a king. "Your mother will recover," he said to Mira. "I've arranged for her treatment. Full medical care, indefinitely." "The life-debt?" Mira asked. "Paid." Vesperian's expression softened. "You saved my life on that bus. Tonight, you saved my kingdom. I'd say we're even. So, I can go home."
"You can do whatever you want." He paused.
"But I hope you'll consider staying. The Crimson Court needs a human voice. Someone who understands both worlds. Someone who paid a bus fare because it was the right thing to do." Mira looked at her mother, now breathing easier with proper medicine. At Ariel, who was coordinating with police. At the vampires standing in streetlight, no longer hiding. "What would I even do? Help us build something new." Vesperian held out his hand, the same hand she'd taken in the alley days ago. "A court that serves all people, not just vampires. We'll fail sometimes, make mistakes, but we'll try to be better." Mira thought about her apartment, her job at the Crescent, her small, predictable life. Then she thought about the child she'd saved in the market, about Helena's ancient wisdom, about 23 vampires who'd risked everything because one human believed in them. She took his hand. "I want a salary," she said, "and benefits, and Tuesdays off." Vesperian laughed, the first time she'd heard genuine joy in his voice. "Done. And a title. If I'm doing this, I want it official." "What title would you like?" Mira smiled. "Human envoy sounds about right." The city dawn broke around them, vampires and humans standing together, watched by millions, beginning something unprecedented. It wouldn't be easy. Many would oppose them. Some vampires would resist change, some humans would demand extinction. But they would try. And trying, Mira had learned, was its own kind of victory. She'd paid a bus fare 3 days ago. Tonight, she'd changed the world. Not bad for a maid's daughter.